A report comes out today. It's done through the University of Oxford and the News and Media Research Centre, also connected to the University of Canberra. It found that, well, trust in the media and how it plays itself out. 60% of people apparently call themselves centrists, which means they're not telling the truth. But also, the majority of Australians surveyed here, again, say they're centrist. 40% say they're strongly left or right. The study finds that Australian TV viewers of commercial channels and subscription channels Sky News are more right-leaning than ABC TV audience. You needed a survey for this? In terms of trust, apparently lefties trust the news media more than centrists or common sense conservatives, libertarians, whatever the heck the right wing wants to be called here. Let's start with you first here, Claire, where trust in media as an institution is always being tallied, but the idea of political affiliation and its link to trust. Now, right-wingers will say lefties love the media because, well, it reinforces all of their opinions, sort of lefty view of the world. But of course, the left will turn around and say, well, we're about facts and the right's just about fat blokes blustering on television. Where do you sit?
Well, I'm actually genuinely don't know where I sit on that spectrum. I think I'm an avid consumer of all different types of news media, and it's a habit that I've had for, you know, coming on 20 years now and can't seem to kick. But trust in institutions, civic institutions, is at an all-time low for across a lot of institutions. So political parties, even NGOs and charity groups are suffering from similar levels of scepticism from the public. There is some, in the US, debate beginning to unpack post-Trump, where the media is just having a look at, having a good look at itself and examining just how it can do a better job of rebuilding trust with the general public. And one of the things that they've found, which I think we can learn from and adopt here, is news outlets that are much more focused on the voters as opposed to the candidates do a lot better job reflecting, and it seems simple to say it, but a lot better job reflecting on what punters are actually looking for in their news source. And credit to Sky, I mean, you guys do a great job of this with people's forums and whatnot, but letting the actual voters determine what the issues and the debates are, as opposed to the top-down approach coming from the candidate. And I think it's something we can pick up here. Yeah, well, thank you for that. I'll give you the tip. Our plan for these by-elections is to get out and get some candidates in front of normal people. Bugger how we ask them questions. It's what normal people want to fire up about. I also think in part of what you're trying to talk about too is that I think that my view as somebody who makes media, right, and obviously media for a certain type of person, I understand that, but I always just think authenticity matters, and I don't mean authenticity in terms of, you know, the act that's put on air about whether it is a performance or not, but it's just also about knowing the difference between something that actually matters and doesn't matter. David, what, if anything, did you read out of this survey, study, whatever it was? Well, the bit about 60% of people saying they're centrists, I mean, that's, you know, you get a splinter up your bum from sitting on the fence when you call yourself a centrist. There's also a definitional problem there, of course. I mean, what words that people say about themselves, what do they mean about themselves? It basically means I'm not a passionate Liberal voter and I'm not a passionate Labor voter. Well, hello, big news there. Yeah. I actually don't think either of them are particularly centrist myself. So correct. I think the word is wrong, but I think what it's revealing is people are saying, well, I'm not committed either way. I'm going to sit there and listen to whatever I think the arguments are, and I'll make my own mind up. Robin? I mean, what a surprise that somebody's worked out the political spectrum between Channel 2 and Sky News. Well, gold medal for everyone. 2 points. The political centre, has been painted in the left-hand gutter. And secondly, this is all reported in The Guardian. What do you expect? Correct. Well, that's fair, and they were begging for money while they were doing it. Can I jump in there, Paul, because I've been waiting for my opportunity to talk over Bronwyn to get her back from all those times. But and I want to roll with the shout-outs to dads, because my old man has this theory that increasingly we're following particular journalists or particular bylines. So we're actually publication agnostic now, and increasingly as readers we go, okay, quite like how that person reports that, and I trust them, and we're getting some convergence there, and I reckon there's definitely something in that.
Yeah, all right. And how does it play out in...
Well, I don't know that you talked over me, Claire, but it was a good try.
Now, just about the political centre, OK. Now, Malcolm Turnbull is still on this thing where he sort of copped it for suggesting that, you know, that he's in the political centre, the sensible centre, it's where Australians are, it's where Menzies was, it's where the Liberal Party should be going forward. I'll let you read a rather lengthy quote about why he believes that, you know, in the mould of Menzies, this is the place to be. Now, Bronwyn, I always find it quite strange to invoke Menzies as the litmus test of being a centrist when he was the Prime Minister of a country where black people didn't count, homosexuals could be thrown in jail, and the White Australia policy was our immigration policy. So the centre, if all of those things are the law of the land and unquestioned, is a whole lot further to the right than it is the centre or the centre-left. Is that wrong? Is that unfair?
Look, when you talk about what Menzies stood for, it was standing for allowing the individual to prosper. It was allowing the individual to take their talents, to turn into the ability to buy a house, to have a small business. These were the forgotten people that he talked about. He said everything else was unionised or it was big business, but he was for the individual to succeed in that environment. The rest of those things you talked about had been on the books of the nation's legislature for, well, decades since the
Sure. I'm not saying he invented them, but if he didn't
there were many things. Well, it was the Liberal Party that finally got rid of the White Australia policy and so on, and so that those things changed. But the philosophy that he's talking about is better expressed by John Howard, and John Howard did it actually last night when his new book was launched, and it was a lovely event to be at because with the exception of one speech which Alan Jones rightly called out this morning from the host, let me say, who's a partner in Gilbert and Tobin, it was where the expression of what he stood for stood out firmly. And John talked about a broad church with conservatism and with a place for classical liberalism, not left-wing liberal, small L liberalism, which has collectivised the individual. It was about the individual. And that's the way it should be expressed. So I don't think that the comparison that Mr Turnbull was making today is the valid one. It's the John Howard definition that you go with.
But it's this thing, Senator Lionhelm, where again, I just said, I mean, to me, these are, you know, when it's taken for granted all of those things that I've just listed, I mean, these are hardly, in my view, when we're looking back at the fullness of history, you know, the grand positions of the centre, that sexual preference and ethnic mix and recognition of Indigenous peoples as people, those are hardly centrist positions.
Well, yeah, but the problem you have is what's left-wing, what's right-wing. You know,
it's where they sat in the old French chamber.
That is. It comes from
the French Revolution.
You know, in the aftermath of the French Revolution.
Yeah, the revolutionists sat on the left and the monarchists sat on the right.
And now people say, well, if the Greens are in favour of it, it must be a left-wing issue.
Correct.
But of course, when you pick up on Bronwyn's point about classical liberalism or libertarianism, I don't see much difference between them.
John Locke, shall we start there?
Yeah, absolutely,
Adam
John
Smith.
Locke. Yeah, absolutely correct. And Jane's on the same page with us. When you're talking about individualism versus collectivism, treating black people, for example, as not eligible to enter the country, that's collectivism. Now, us classical liberals, us libertarians would say, no, we can't have any of that. You treat them as individuals.
Right.
You know, they're people at the end of the day. What colour they are is neither here nor there.
But these are the principles of free enterprise, which is based on individualism.
That too,
but
absolutely.
As I said, that small L liberalism, which is what is talked about in the United States, that is collectivised.
Yeah, that's
and it doesn't belong
here. We were never a centrist party. The Liberal Party's never been a centrist party. It has been a centre-right party, certainly. And Bronwyn's right. It encompasses the best traditions of Burkean conservatism and the liberalism of a John Stuart Mill or hopefully an Adam Smith in my for me.
Burkean conservatism is sort of respect for institutions. So it depends what institutions you want to respect. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, there were communists saying, no, we don't want to change. they could legitimately be described as conservatives because...
Press used to describe them that way.
Yes, indeed.
Getting a bit philosophical here.
I was going to say, Claire's glazing over at this dinner party. She's loving this conversation. This is the bit where she's checking her phone.
I stumbled into a Liberal Party branch meeting and I don't know how to get out.
Can I just... While we're doing that, though, that quote from Malcolm Turnbull was also about a book launch, and I'm just going to put in a little plug here for Paul Ritchie's new book, which is a rewrite of the Forgotten People speeches, and I think it's a terrific book, and I know that because I contributed one of those
There you
chapters. So on the rationalisation of industry, chapter 19, it's the highlight of the book. It's a terrific book, and the contributions which update and sort of contemporise, Menzies' Forgotten People speeches. It's terrific. It's really a good thing to do.